As an anxious Daniel prepares for his return to work, Bertie presents him with a "World's Best Teacher" mug. In the corridor, Lily taunts Daniel by reading out Truth Teller 2's latest posts. When she purposely bashes into Daniel, he's gutted to find his new mug smashed to pieces and breaks down in tears. Jake films on his phone. Daniel barrels into the Rovers on a mission to get drunk, but when Adam bans Sean from serving him, Daniel storms out. Spotting Megan in the precinct, Daniel lets rip at her for ruining his life. Is Megan in danger? Meanwhile, Lisa tells Todd she's interviewed Danielle. In the visiting room, a distressed Summer reveals to Todd that she's considering pleading guilty to manslaughter as it seems her only option. Todd's heartbroken for her as he opens up to Sarah. Todd asks Lisa if he can have his phone back from the police now, but her response floors Todd. Elsewhere, in the pub, Carl sidles over to Tyrone and tells him he can see fear in his eyes. It's obvious he's hiding something and he intends to find out what it is. Also today, Idris calls at Speed Doll and flirts unashamedly with Leanne, suggesting they have another night out. When Alia warns her she's playing with fire, will Leanne agree? Idris tells Alia that he'd like her to look after his legal affairs. The rain hammered down on the cobbles as darkness settled over Weatherfield, the streetlights casting blurred golden reflections across the wet pavement. Inside the cafe, tension simmered beneath the hum of conversation and clinking mugs. It had already been a disastrous day for Daniel Osbourne, and by the time evening arrived, he was barely holding himself together. Everything had started to unravel that morning. Daniel stood in the middle of his flat, staring at the pile of papers scattered across the table. Essays. Homework. Notes for his upcoming lesson. Normally, he was organized to the point of obsession, but today nothing made sense. His head pounded after a sleepless night worrying about Bertie, who had developed a fever during the early hours. Daisy had tried calming him before leaving for work. Daniel, he's fine, she'd insisted gently. Kids get sick all the time. But Daniel couldn't shake the fear. Ever since losing Sinead, panic lived inside him like a permanent shadow. By 8 a.m., Bertie's fever had dropped, yet Daniel was already running late for school. He rushed through the drizzle, coffee splashing onto his coat as he checked his phone every few seconds for updates. Then came disaster number 1. The head teacher pulled him into the office before classes even began. "There's been a complaint," she said carefully. Daniel frowned. "About what?" "A parent claims you unfairly targeted their daughter during yesterday's lesson." Daniel blinked in disbelief. "What? That's ridiculous." The parent in question was Megan's mother. Megan Bailey had only arrived at Weatherfield High a few months earlier, but she'd quickly become one of Daniel's most difficult students. Clever but disruptive, confident but reckless, Megan had a habit of twisting situations to avoid consequences. Yesterday, Daniel had caught her using AI software during an assignment and confronted her in front of the class. Megan denied everything, stormed out, and apparently told her mother Daniel had humiliated her. Now the accusation sat on his record pending investigation. By lunchtime, Daniel's carefully controlled composure had started cracking. "You all right?" another teacher asked in the corridor. "Fine," Daniel snapped, before immediately regretting it. But things only got worse. He checked his phone during break and found 3 missed calls from the nursery. Bertie had become ill again, and they needed someone to pick him up immediately. Daniel closed his eyes. Perfect. When he explained the situation to the head teacher, she reluctantly agreed to let him leave early but reminded him the complaint meeting would still happen tomorrow morning. As Daniel walked through the rain toward the nursery, frustration boiled inside him. Every part of his life suddenly felt fragile. His job. His parenting. His future. And somehow, Megan sat at the center of it all. At the nursery, Bertie clung weakly to Daniel's shoulder while coughing softly. "It's probably just a virus," the worker reassured him. Daniel nodded distractedly. By the time he returned home, exhaustion consumed him. Bertie finally fell asleep on the sofa beneath a blanket while Daniel stared blankly at the muted television. Then his phone buzzed again. A message from the school. Urgent, additional concern raised regarding your conduct with student Megan Bailey. Daniel's stomach dropped. What now? He muttered. The email explained Megan had claimed Daniel aggressively cornered her after class. Daniel knew exactly what she referred to, a brief conversation outside the classroom where he'd warned her about plagiarism. It had lasted less than 2 minutes. But suddenly the wording sounded sinister. Aggressive. Cornered. Daniel rubbed his face in disbelief. This wasn't just a complaint anymore. Megan was building a narrative. And if the school believed her, his entire career could collapse. Across the street, Megan sat in Roy's Rolls scrolling through social media while her friends laughed nearby. She looked perfectly relaxed, completely unbothered by the chaos unfolding around her. When Daniel spotted her through the cafe window later that evening, something inside him snapped. He shouldn't confront her. He knew that. Every rational part of his brain screamed at him to walk away. But anger overwhelmed reason. Daniel marched into the cafe, ignoring Roy's concerned expression. Megan, he said sharply. The teenager looked up, startled. Oh. Sir. We need to talk. Her friends exchanged awkward glances before quickly leaving. Roy stepped forward cautiously. Daniel. It's fine, Daniel interrupted, though his voice trembled. Megan folded her arms defensively. Daniel lowered his voice but couldn't hide the fury underneath. What exactly are you trying to do to me? Megan stared at him innocently. I don't know what you mean. Yes, you do. Roy glanced nervously between them. Daniel, he warned quietly, maybe this isn't appropriate. But Daniel barely heard him. You lied, he hissed. You know you lied. Megan's confident expression flickered for the first time. I told the truth. No, you didn't. You cheated, I caught you, and now you're trying to turn this around because you can't handle consequences. The cafe fell silent. Even the customers stopped eating. Megan stood abruptly. Don't shout at me. I'm not shouting. You came in here attacking me. Daniel realized too late how the situation looked. A furious teacher confronting a teenage student in public. Exactly the kind of image that could destroy him. Roy stepped firmly between them. That's enough. Daniel breathed heavily, shame crashing over him. For several seconds nobody spoke. Then Megan quietly said something that completely blindsided him. You embarrassed me in front of everyone. Daniel frowned. What? Her eyes filled with tears. You think I'm stupid, she whispered. You always look at me like I'm trouble. Daniel's anger faltered. That's not true. Yes, it is. Roy gently guided Megan back toward her seat while Daniel stood frozen. For the first time all day, uncertainty replaced rage. Had he misjudged her? Or was this another manipulation? He honestly couldn't tell anymore. Later that night, Daniel sat alone in the flat after putting Bertie to bed. Rain battered the windows while guilt churned inside him. The confrontation replayed endlessly in his head. He'd lost control. No matter how unfair Megan's accusations were, confronting her publicly had been a catastrophic mistake. A knock at the door startled him. Daniel opened it to find Daisy standing outside holding takeaway coffees. Heard about school, she said softly. Daniel sighed. News travels fast. Can I come in? He stepped aside. Daisy placed the coffees on the table and studied him carefully. You look awful. Thanks. I mean it. Daniel sank onto the sofa. I think I've ruined everything. Daisy sat beside him. What happened? Daniel hesitated before telling her about the cafe confrontation. Her eyes widened slightly. Oh, Daniel. I know. What were you thinking? I wasn't. That was the problem. Daniel buried his face in his hands. She's lying about me, Daisy. And everyone just believes her. Daisy's expression softened. Not everyone. But what if the school does? He looked genuinely terrified. For a moment Daisy saw not the intelligent teacher who always tried to stay composed, but a grieving widower still haunted by loss and constantly afraid life might collapse again. You need to stay calm, she told him gently. Tomorrow, you explain everything properly. Daniel laughed bitterly. And if they don't listen? Daisy didn't answer immediately. Instead, she squeezed his hand. Then you fight for yourself. The next morning arrived too quickly. Daniel barely slept. At Weatherfield High, whispers followed him through the corridors. Whether imagined or real, every glance felt loaded with suspicion. The complaint meeting began at 9 a.m. The head teacher sat opposite Daniel with another staff member beside her. Megan and her mother entered moments later. Megan refused to meet Daniel's eyes. Mr. Osbourne, the head teacher began carefully, serious concerns have been raised regarding your conduct. Daniel swallowed hard. I understand. Megan's mother spoke immediately. My daughter feels intimidated by him. Daniel clenched his jaw. I never intended to intimidate anyone. But you confronted her publicly yesterday, the mother shot back. Daniel's heart sank. So Megan had already reported the cafe incident. The head teacher looked disappointed. Is that true? Daniel hesitated. Yes. But that is completely inappropriate. I know, Daniel admitted. I lost my temper. Megan finally spoke quietly. You shouted at me. Daniel looked at her, stunned by how small and vulnerable she suddenly appeared. Maybe that was what made the situation so complicated. Because part of him genuinely believed she was manipulating events. But another part wondered whether he'd become so stressed and defensive that he'd failed to see her perspective entirely. I'm sorry, he said sincerely. The room fell silent. Megan looked surprised. Daniel continued carefully. I shouldn't have approached you outside school. That was wrong. But I also stand by my concerns about the plagiarism issue. Her mother scoffed. So you're still accusing her? I'm asking for honesty. Megan's eyes filled with tears again. I didn't cheat. Daniel exhaled shakily. This was going nowhere. After the meeting, Daniel walked aimlessly through the tunnel behind the street, emotionally drained. Then he heard footsteps behind him. Megan. She stood several feet away, arms folded against the cold wind. What do you want now? Daniel asked tiredly. I didn't mean for this to happen. Daniel stared at her. Really? She looked down. I was angry. So you made things up. I never said you touched me or anything. I threatened you. You scared me yesterday. Daniel rubbed his forehead. I was angry, Megan. But I would never hurt you. She nodded slowly. For the first time, she seemed genuinely remorseful. My mom always overreacts, she admitted quietly. Once she gets involved, everything becomes massive. Daniel leaned against the wall, exhausted. So why keep pushing it? Megan hesitated before answering. Because everyone already thinks I'm the bad kid. Daniel frowned. What? At my old school too. Teachers decided what I was like before they even knew me. Her voice cracked slightly. You did the same. Daniel's anger slowly dissolved into uncomfortable reflection. Had he judged her too quickly? Maybe. But that didn't excuse the damage already done. You could have ruined my career, he said quietly. Megan looked horrified. I didn't want that. Then what did you want? She wiped her eyes. I wanted someone to actually listen. For several seconds neither spoke. Then Daniel sighed deeply. This entire situation's a mess. Megan gave a small nod. Yeah. Over the following days, tensions around Weatherfield slowly eased. Megan eventually admitted to exaggerating parts of her complaint, though she still insisted Daniel embarrassed her unfairly. The school issued Daniel a formal warning about professional boundaries but closed the investigation without further action. Technically, he survived. Emotionally, however, the experience left scars. One evening, Daniel sat outside the Rovers nursing a drink when Roy approached him. You all right? Roy asked gently. Daniel managed a faint smile. Getting there. Roy sat beside him. You know, people make mistakes when they're hurting. Daniel looked thoughtfully down the street. I think we were both hurting. Roy nodded wisely. That's often how conflict starts. Daniel glanced toward the cobbles where Megan walked past with friends, laughing at something on her phone. For once, there was no anger. Just relief. The terrible week had nearly destroyed both of them. But maybe, in an unexpected way, it had also forced them to understand each other. And on Coronation Street, understanding was often far harder than forgiveness. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Crown ST.